Did you read Warrior Cats growing up? I know I did. When I was a little kid, I used to love those cats. Fireheart was such a comfort to me when I was in middle school. How he managed to overcome his limitations as a kitty pet and become leader of his clan. All my friends read Warrior Cats, but none of them were as big a fans as me. I owned every book, and unlike my friends, I had actually bought them from Borders and not stolen them from the school library. I asked my friends and families for cat plushies at every birthday and holiday, and I named them all after characters from the series. Of all of them, though, Fireheart was always my favorite. And I had an orange and white Webkins plus I named Fireheart. I took him everywhere with me, until he grew ragged and worn. His white fur was stained and his orange fur was torn. I had to sew back on limbs multiple times, but the final straw was when his eyes fell out. They were those tiny little bun-type eyes they often use for plush toys. And I suppose the threads holding them in just became loose after so much time. Finally, my parents threw him away. Eventually I moved away from Warrior Cats, but the other day, I was feeling nostalgic. I used the Wayback Machine to try to relive a little bit of my childhood by going to the old Warrior Cats website. Unlike the new site, which is pretty simple, the old site had forums and flash games you could play, and I used to spend hours playing the games and talking to other kids in the forums about my favorite characters after school every day. I was disappointed to see that none of the forums really worked, and all the flash games were broken, unrecoverable by the Wayback Machine. I was just about to close the page when I clicked on a flash game I didn't remember. It was called Was I Not Good Enough For You? That was a weird name for a game, I thought, clicking on it. To my surprise, the game was working. I was so excited. This was the opportunity I'd been waiting for to relive my childhood. I waited for the little flash loading bar to finish, with little paw prints walking across the screen, before, to my utter excitement, Fireheart appeared on the screen. There was no main screen or options, but that didn't bother me. I was just excited to see Fireheart again. The screen showed Fireheart from the chest up, sitting and blinking. It was orange and white, just like my Webkins Plus. That's what I was most excited about. To see this official Warrior Cats game give him such a similar design to my favorite childhood toy was so exciting to see. I waited a moment to see if anything would happen, but it didn't. So I waved the mouse around the screen and then clicked on the game. The scene cut away, and I could see Fireheart was sitting across from Scourge during the final battle of the series, where Lion Clan and Blood Clan fight for the forest. I wondered immediately if this was some kind of action or fighting game, which would be really cool. I wondered if it was released after I had grown away from the series, and that's why I had never heard of it. It was only then I noticed that Tiger Claw was lying on the ground between Scourge and Fireheart, and his guts were torn open and spilling out into the grass, and he was covered in blood and dead. I was shocked to see that they would include something so graphic in a kid's flash game. Even if that is what happened in the books, it seemed like way too much. It made me sick to my stomach to look at it, even if Tiger Claw was a bad guy. And I was glad when the scene cut to Scourge. He nodded, and a fight broke out between Blood Clan and Lion Clan. I was expecting to control Fireheart, but when the game gave me control over my mouse, I was playing as Scourge. I ran forward towards Fireheart and clicked on him, which made Scourge jump on him and dig his claws into his throat. Blood pulled out where Scourge's claws dug into him, and my stomach did not flip. I didn't want to be doing this to Fireheart. And then the screen flickered red and black for a moment, which made me blink, and when I looked at the game again, it looked kind of like those old Operation Flash games, where you controlled the scalpel with your mouse and had to carefully remove funny things from a man's body. Except, my mouse was controlling Scourge's right paw, and Fireheart was lying under Scourge, trapped by his other claws. I wiggled the mouse around the screen, moving Scourge's paw. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do, because there wasn't any instructions. But I noticed as I passed Scourge's paw over Fireheart's face, the image changed and his claws opened. It seemed like an indication the game wanted me to do something there, so I clicked my mouse. With hyper-realistic animation, Scourge plunged his claws into Fireheart's face and pulled out his right eye. I could see all the meaty parts coming off the eye as he pulled it out, and the sound of a screaming cat filled my speakers. I closed my eyes and covered my ears in fear, but the sound wouldn't go away and I had to unplug them. I was aching and I thought I might throw up. I didn't know what was happening, but when I looked back at the game, Fireheart now only had one eye and a gory, blood-covered hole where the other one should be. He was crying. Scourge's paw was back though, and it didn't look like the game was over. I considered closing the page because I didn't want to go through that again, but I had to know what would happen. I moved my mouse to his other eye and clicked. The same hyper-realistic animation played, and Scourge pulled out Fireheart's other eye. But this time, my speakers were unplugged, so I just closed my eyes and tried not to imagine it in my mind. Poor Fireheart, I felt like I had betrayed him. When I opened my eyes again, Scourge was staring at me out of the screen of the game, smiling and covered in blood. Something was off, though, about him. I stared at him for a moment, trying to figure out what it was, before suddenly I realized. Scourge's eyes were supposed to be blue, but the Scourge in front of me had green eyes, the same color as Fireheart's eyes. I quickly closed out my browser and turned off my computer. I was so upset. Why would they have made that game? Warrior Cats was a kid's book series, and the flash games on the website were for really little kids. It didn't make any sense. I went straight to bed and cried myself to sleep. I was so scared. My mom even called me for dinner, and I didn't go because I lost my appetite. Just thinking about Fireheart with Scourge taking his eyes, it haunted me. That night, I had a nightmare. In this nightmare, I was in the forest at night, walking around, when I encountered 4 trees and the great rock in the center. The first thought was that this is so cool. I'd always wanted to come to 4 trees, but sitting on top of the great rock, alone, was my old Webkinz Fireheart plushie, worn and ragged and with no eyes. Was I not good enough for you? The plushie asked me in a booming voice, as blood began to seep out of its eye holes and onto the fabric of its fur. I screamed and tried to run, and that's when I woke up, panting. That game has haunted me ever since. I don't know who made it or why it was the only one on the Wayback Machine that worked, but I know one thing. If you ever find a working flash game on the old Warrior Cats website via the Wayback Machine, do not play it.